Hey there guys, welcome to the next video here on the channel. I wanted to focus this video on using the duct tape sheets, like kind of going over what they're used for and what their major purpose is. The last time that I actually showed these on the channel was a few years ago when they actually first came out, and I haven't used them since. I don't typically use them, in my day-to-day duct taping, so I wanted to kind of, use them in this video and kind of show you guys what you can do with them. So let's get started here. So yeah, like I said, a few years ago, Duct Brand came out with these cool duct tape sheets, and the coolest thing about them when they first came out was that it's one giant sheet of unbroken duct tape. The only way that you would be able to do this with the rolls is to take a whole bunch of strips and line them up, and of course you'd have, the edges where the each strip ended and each strip began. Well, the interesting thing about these is that it's totally one giant strip of tape. There's not, like any crease marks or anything. It's kind of just one perfect sheet here. They usually come on these cool, just sticker sheet backing, like you typically see on the back of your sticker sheets. The duct tape is a little bit stickier than typical stickers, so it's kind of hard to peel up. It's a little bit more difficult. But let's go over kind of the ways that you can use them and what they're typically used for. Alright, now the major idea behind these was to kind of allow people who never worked with duct tape before to really get into it, and kind of an easy way for them to kind of get used to working with duct tape, because all they have to do is kind of draw something on it. And the typical way that people will do is draw something like letters or other shapes and sizes and then cut them out. And since you can just take your pair of scissors and then just cut both sheets, it works very much like a kind of sticker board here. So for example, I got this piece cut out here, and I'm not going to peel off the entire thing until I get my entire shape cut out. And this is kind of like what the major target for these things were, because like I said, if you've never worked with duct tape before, like anybody can use a pen and a pair of scissors to cut out various shapes and then just peel it up and stick it onto something. So that was the major part of that, and that's what most of them are used for. And I'm also going to use my hobby knife in just a second to cut out the middle of the A, and then we'll have that letter there. So as I showed you, after you cut it out, you kind of just have to separate the tape from the backing, and then you just peel up your simple design that you just cut out. Just like that. And of course now you can stick that on pretty much anything like a sticker. It's a really simple way of doing duct tape stenciling. It kind of gives you the background, and since you can kind of hold it as you're cutting it, as instead of using a cutting mat, it kind of gives you that cool way of working with it, which is a lot easier. But also you're kind of limited because you can't do a whole bunch of really complex designs. You can only do something kind of fairly simple like this. Now another way that people will use the duct tape sheets is to use kind of like hole punches. They're not exactly typically hole punches because it's not just a single hole punch, but there's a whole bunch of different crafting punches where you can kind of buy them, and they're kind of, to have different shapes like butterflies or paw prints or whatever, and you kind of latch onto it, push it, and then it'll kind of cut out just that image on top of the piece of paper usually. But you can also use that with duct tape, so some people will kind of incorporate that. It's also another interesting way of adding kind of designs to your duct tape sheet. Now another thing you can use these for are a Cricut machine. If you happen to have a Cricut machine at home, you can use these to feed into the Cricut machine, and of course it can cut out any kind of design or any kind of really pattern that you feed into your machine. So if you're not familiar with Cricut, I'll put a link in the description box below. You can check out the website, and it's kind of a cool machine that kind of cuts out designs on paper typically, or different kinds of cardstock, but you can also feed these into it as well, and there are a whole bunch of crafters that'll do that, and there's a whole bunch of cool videos on. Since the Cricut machine became popular with duct tape, you can check all those out on YouTube and Google as well. But I'll put a link in the description box for the actual website, and you can check it out. And of course there's no limit to how big you can make the design, as long as it'll fit on one of these sheets right about here. One of the reasons why people don't typically use these, I think myself included in this giant amount of crafters out there that don't really use these too often, is mostly the price and the fact that you can just take a roll of tape, and then just, if you wanted to make something this big, if you needed it to be this big, you can just cut out the strips and then apply them onto your cutting mat or some other surface and then work with it from there. The fact that they're fairly expensive, and the fact that you can only use like certain parts of it, you can't if I wanted to cut this entire thing out, it would take up almost the entire piece, and I'd only have probably about this piece and this piece up here to work with, and that'd be about it. So it's kind of like an interesting way. If you're really getting into tape, these can really help out. If you're trying to make a wallet or something like that, you can cut out, you know, the strips that you need and then apply them. But the issue is sometimes, you know, if you don't cut them out perfectly and you start applying them, and if you mess up, you might have to, you know, get some more tape. And if you were just using a roll, you could just, you know, take out some more tape and go with it. But you might not have, you know, as much, you know, tape to work with if you're using these sheets. So it's kind of, you know, just a different way of working with tape. Like I said, I don't typically use it myself, but because I usually just use my rolls for all of that, which is a lot cheaper. You know, I think a package for these, I think it's been a while since I checked the prices. It's probably about $3 or $4 for a package of like 5 or 6 of these pieces, and then of course it's $3.37 a roll typically, and you get usually 15 yards with the neon prints and 20 yards on the solid color. So it's a major difference. If you're buying with the roll, you do get a lot more tape with the roll, and you can of course kind of incorporate it and work with it in different ways and designs up to the specifications that you want to, rather than, you know, just this pre-cut sheet here. So it's definitely, you know, a cool method. It definitely works for some people. It doesn't work for as much for others, but that's kind of a cool info tutorial on working with the duct tape sheets, and hopefully you guys can come up with a bunch of cool ways, you know, of working with it and really coming up with your own personal way of using them. So hopefully you liked the video. I'll catch you guys next time on the channel pretty soon for another tutorial, which should be coming tomorrow. So see you then.